Again.
Well, for more on today's events in Paris, I'm joined live by Darren Stanton, an expert on body language. Mr. Stanton, thank you for joining us on the programme. Not to overlook the very important reason that world leaders are in Paris for today. It's always fascinating to see how these VIPs interact when they're together, isn't it? So you've been watching from the sidelines. What can you tell us about the atmosphere there today between these world leaders? Were they tense? Were they relaxed? What do you think?
Yeah, as you've already said, it is a very important historic meeting they've gone to today, obviously for that reason. But in terms of the actual interaction between the various politicians is fascinating, because very simple gestures and expressions can give off so much in terms of what their relationship with each other is.
I'm no body language expert myself, but it seemed very obvious the affection that President Macron was showing towards President Trump. We saw him touching his knee, we saw him patting him on the back. Trump not so forthcoming with the affection towards Macron, though. What does that tell us?
OK, it was actually quite fascinating and hilarious at the same time, because we've seen President Macron putting his hand on President Trump's back, which is, again, a very clear power gesture, saying that, I'm the more important man, or I'm the more powerful man, which obviously President Trump's aware of and didn't like at all with his facial expression. And then when the two men were sat down, as you've already said, President Macron kept touching President Trump's knee. And President Trump clearly wasn't happy about that. And I think at one point he even sort of moved his whole body away from his gesture. And we've seen this very common gesture that President Trump makes called a reverse steeple with his hands. And we can see at times he's tapping his fingers, which is a sign of sort of anxiety and frustration at just wanting to get away from the situation.
Yeah, he really wasn't happy about that at all, was he? Now, talking about the power struggle between those two, there was that handshake. And, Trump's well known for giving unusually strong handshakes. But this time it was the other way around, wasn't it? It was Macron that seemed to have the upper hand, if you will, in that handshake. Absolutely. Again, I reported on Russia today when President Trump was first inaugurated, and his handshake made world news. And I think President Macron now is well versed in some of the gestures and has clearly been coached in terms of how President Trump conveys himself. And this, what we call in psychology, a bone crusher handshake, which is to denote power. But again, President Macron turned the tables on this occasion, and we can see this almost like an arm wrestle going on between the two men, and it's literally an unconscious power struggle. So it was really fascinating to see that. Also interesting was Macron's interaction with Germany's Angela Merkel. They seemed very close, almost intimate, if you like. They were holding hands at one point, I believe. What does that say? Absolutely. Again, we all have our sort of what we call proximal zones of closeness that we're happy to allow people into. But it's clear that these two politicians clearly have a mutual respect for each other. And as you've already intimated, they're very comfortable being very close to each other and touch each other. So I think they have generally got, mutual deep rapport and respect for each other. President Putin, on the other hand, there's no footage, at least, of him interacting very closely with any of the other world leaders. What can we read into what we have seen of his behaviour at during the day?
Again, I found his behaviour to be what we call quite stoic. So he's usually quite animated, and especially in terms of the way that he sits. He tends to spread his legs again, which is a power gesture. And we often see Putin and Trump sort of doing these various power gestures. But again, as you've already said, not a great deal of footage from today. However, he does seem to be a lot more solemn and a lot more respectful due to the occasion of the event. So not giving too much away today, President Putin.
Darren Stanton, fascinating to get your take on the day. Body language expert and human lie detector, I do believe. Thank you for your time. Well, not every